What can the way that Hinduism has been portrayed in our fandoms teach us about our own faith and about astral projection? Because, I want to do that. Seems cool, looks cool. Maybe I can grow a third eye like Doctor Strange. That'd be sick, right? Guys, I can't wait for this episode today. We're going to be discussing some of our favorite fandoms and how they've portrayed Hinduism, including Doctor Who, the Persona series, Supernatural, The Life of Pi, Indiana Jones, and of course, Doctor Strange. I'm Joshua Noel. I'm one of your co-hosts today, here with the one and only, the only reason we continue to do the show. You guys think it's for you, but really it's because we all just want an excuse to continue to speak to the one and only Christian Ashley. Welcome to your show.
Thank you, Joshua.
I did that wrong. Welcome to your show, Christian Ashley. I need to remember to do that like every time. It just fills me with so much joy to do applause after I say someone's name. Yeah, it's good times. It's good times. Well, guys, if you don't know, this is Cinematic Geekology. We're the Priest of the Geeks. This is going live first to our patrons. So we want to especially thank everyone who supports the show. This goes live to them first so they can interact with us live, ask questions, anything like that if they want. And if you would like such a privilege, you can go to Patreon. You can join them for as little as I think like $3 a month, something like that, $1 a month. I don't know. I haven't looked over there in a minute. I got to be honest.
I think it's $1.
I know there is a $3 option. I know it exists. So I just couldn't remember if $1 existed. But you guys can go over there. You can join. You can get perks like joining us live, asking us questions, voting on our All Reading Count series, getting all the bonus segments we do. There's a lot of stuff that we do just for patrons because how much we appreciate them. So consider joining them and consider hitting that like and subscribe button, because if you don't smash the subscribe button, you do smash Will's heart, and that's just unfortunate. So if you're on YouTube, which everyone listening to this is, smash that like and subscribe button, please. And of course, and if you want to see more of our series, that's like our companion series that goes along with our annual theme of religions, then you can go to YouTube and there's a playlist of companion series and you can just watch all of these little things we've done. This is the last of like the major Eastern religions. We still have a few other I think we're going to do, but as far as like the major ones, we've covered Taoism, Confucianism, Buddhism, and now we're here discussing Hinduism and our favorite fandoms. So we've had a lot of fun this year. I think we've also done Judaism already. So 5 down, at least 7 more to go. Do you remember what the other ones are? I know one is going to be the other Eastern religion we're doing. It's one that appears in a lot of anime, but I don't think it's really that relevant in like real life for the most part. Do you want to talk about things like Shintoism? Is that right? Does that sound
Shintoism, like yes. We're doing atheism, agnosticism one. Let's see, what else were we doing?
I'm pulling it up.
I know we're doing Catholicism.
Oh yeah, that'll be fun. Atheism is not Mormonism. Polynesian religions. Oh, we might have replaced. We want to put Shintoism instead of Polynesian religions.
It's paganism, and then Celtic religions. Yeah, and I think we've mentioned them all now.
Yeah. Celtic's going to be fun. That'll be a fun one.
Islam. Islam is the last one.
Have we done Islam yet?
Islam is next. Well, actually, I think it's June.
Oh, wow. That's a schedule I'm making now. I should know that. Anyways, we're going to have a lot of fun. Today, we're going to be focusing in on where we've seen Hinduism and our favorite fandoms. So, to start us off, there's really only one fandom that we could start with. And if this isn't the first thing you thought of, shame on you if you didn't immediately think Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, otherwise known as one of my favorite films. This might be my all-time favorite film.
Okay. Solid choice.
Depending on when you ask me, I'll either say this movie, Star Wars A New Hope, or Captain America Winter Soldier. But I think if you really pushed me and like pressed me and made me choose between those three, I'd probably choose this one. This would probably be it. But weirdly enough, this was actually Christian's pick. He got to pick before me. Christian, you want to talk some about like where we see Hinduism in this film, and how you think it's portrayed, whether good, bad, indifferent, all of the above?
As far as this is concerned, in Indiana and Shrieking Woman and Short Round end up in India through the events at the beginning of the film, crossing the border from China. They stumble upon this kind of
Shrieking
cultish
woman.
area. Yeah, she has a name, Willie or something like that.
I like
Uh,
the shrieking woman.
and they come to this area where the sacred stones are at, and they're supposed to benefit this town, but they've been stolen by this group of thuggy cultists who are using them and abusing them for other means. Now, as far as how they're being portrayed, not precisely as accurately as possible, but there's enough there, and it helps too that Indiana Jones, the films are being made in like the serial format of the 40s, which is what they're heavily inspired by, and they didn't really care so much about accuracy so much as what looked cool on the screen. And so I think there's a little leeway we can give them, but not completely. Hey, you're muted there, buddy.
It didn't want to show the slide. I was like, why won't it just show the right slide? Yeah, one thing I thought was really interesting, because we're not just reviewing the films, because we could just say this is the perfect film and leave it at that, but we're trying to dig down specifically into how they treated or portrayed this religion. And it was interesting. So the stones are part of, I forget exactly what it is, but it is part of like an actual part of Hinduism, just like the Ark of the Covenant truly is part of Judaism. The third film, we get the Holy Grail, which is really part of Catholicism. So like, as far as like making it something sacred, something holy, I think it's cool that they did that. What I had a hate love with how they handle this. Like again, I love the film, one of my favorite films of all time, probably my favorite film of all time. But I don't love how so in the village it's like peaceful, everyone's good. So I feel like we have a good portrayal, a positive portrayal of Hinduism and how people are there believe and what they think and how they want their sacred object. Makes sense. Which he runs into this village after some shenanigans, and he basically falls out of a plane, and boop, we're on an adventure now because we said so. That's why.
Yes.
And then he ends up, feast, getting tricked, ends up in an underground religious cult thing, and that's where we see like the savages pulling out people's hearts and like this like dark evil version of Hinduism, basically. And I think what's interesting is they show a positive and a negative. So it's kind of like a net neutral, maybe. Like it's not just trying to show it as, oh, Hinduism is evil or Hinduism is good. But what is interesting is the good village, it's still this like third world, whatever kind of country kind of vibe of, oh, these are unintelligent people. And then the bad Hindus are also these unintelligent savages. So I find it a little concerning that the civilized, intelligent people were the good Christians back in Europe and America, and then the uncivilized, unintelligent people are the Hindus in India. That's where I'm like, maybe they could have done a little bit better on how they portrayed that.
Mm-hmm. And it gets into things that are like close to Hinduism. And you had this Sankara stones, which applied to the Adi Shankara, which are basically, I'm not an expert, so I apologize if I get anything wrong, but they were used by some of the gods of Hinduism alongside humanity to fight against evil, and were meant for
Mm-hmm.
protection in some respects. And you get the Thuggee cult was something that actually existed in India.
Mm-hmm.
Really got noticed by the British Empire after they took control of India post the 18th century. I think in the early 19th century is when they started fighting against the British occupation, and that's where we get the word thug from, is Thuggee, in that they were uh, seen by the British colonizers there as like this rebel force that had nothing to do with anything good. They were bandits, but they also had a religion that they kept up with, some of which they bring into the film in a far more negative sense than they themselves would have looked at it, because they see Kali and Shiva as more malevolent than they actually are. in the film, and
Mhm.
if anything, they're more about avenging injustice in proper Hinduism.
Yeah, yeah. Which, sorry guys, I'm doing this a little out of order because I didn't put this in the outline and I forgot. But I think it actually merits that we probably should discuss what Hinduism is and what our history with Hinduism
Oh
is.
yes.
Um, because yeah, like in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, um, both of these things exist, right? Like the third world little village that's actually positive influence, all good things that practice Hinduism that exist. So do the cult that you mentioned. But by and large, most people who believe in that way, even in this time, were part of civilized culture in India. You know, they went to their 9 to 5 jobs, they did everything normal. And much like most Christians, it was like nominally Hindu, right? Like they would say they believed in God. They would maybe go to a temple and meditate every now and then. You know, not Easter and Christmas, but their holidays. You know, like
Yeah.
it's not people who are Hindu aren't all like, oh, hey, we're all either part of this cult or constantly thinking about sacred objects in a village. Largely, it's people who are just nominally religious, just like most Christians. Um, yeah, that's the problem I have with how the film portrayed it because it almost skipped over most of what Hinduism is in its
Yeah.
own time. But like you mentioned, part of what, and we're going to do an episode on Indiana Jones soon, but part of what Indiana Jones is trying to do is deconstruct what film is for the different decades that we see Indiana Jones in.
Mhm.
So part of what we're seeing this in is a deconstruction of what films were like in that time. And of course, they did portray other cultures that way. And that's what it is. Just like if, let's say, we had Indiana Jones in the 2020s, we should expect certain things like time travel nonsense, right? Like that's
Mhm.
just what Indiana Jones would do because it's a deconstructionist film. Like that's the point of what Indiana Jones is.
Yeah.
Hint of how, what
And
I think
even
of
the
the newest
Kingdom
film.
King Kin and even Kingdom of the Crystal Skull was a pastiche of 50s films
Yeah.
where it was all sci-fi and aliens were involved, and that was a huge jump from what people were expecting because they didn't know what it was homaging. And yeah, there's still problems with the films, but that's okay
Mhm.
if you know what they're going for. You look at the early 30s and 40s serials that this is kind of making its own statement on. These things happen. You always end with the cliffhangers in different parts. You go to unexplored regions of the world or where people don't speak
Mhm.
English and they're just different and alien and foreign. Like that's what happens. Is it a perfect portrayal? No, absolutely not. But it
Yeah.
gets what it's trying to do.
Yeah. Well, and that's where I had such a hard time with Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. I just did not count it for the longest time until someone told me, hey, Indiana Jones films are actually meant to be film critiques. Like they're actually commenting
Mhm.
on the film industry. I was like, oh, I never thought of it like that. Because, you know, when you grow up with Indiana Jones is cool action hero, and everything he does should be cool action hero. Um, and for me, I always, one of the reasons I love the original Indiana Jones trilogies, because I've always been fascinated with other religions. And, you know,
Mhm.
you start with Judaism, then you go to Hinduism, and then you go to Catholicism. And for me as a kid, man, that was fascinating. And that's what the films were to me. They were a door in to explore these other religions. And then all of a sudden you have Kingdom of the Crystal Skull and it's aliens. I'm like, that's not. I wanted you to cover, Confucianism this time or something. Like,
Yeah.
but that's not what the point of the film was. I just misunderstood the points of the film. And now that I have a better understanding and appreciation for what the films are trying to do, I can appreciate all of it better, including how they portray this. Because if you think about what it's deconstructing, think of like the Rambo films coming out around the same time, right? At that point, you would exclusively usually get evil savages in other countries, and other countries are bad guys. But here, it shows evil savages, but also peaceful village. They're also the good guys. So even though it didn't go as far as I wanted to show what normal Hinduism is like, it did critique this portrayal of the other as only evil. And I think that was the important message that the film was trying to get to.
It shows a lot more nuance than you would have expected of the time. And it also doesn't help. Hinduism as a religion is very frustrating to study because there's no
Correct.
like unified Hindu church or pope or what have you, or anything that makes sure these are things everyone will believe in. Even in Christianity, there, your Catholics, your Orthodox, your Protestants, they're going to believe different things, but the core concept, for the most part, remains the same, as opposed to Hinduism, where some people add Jesus as another god to worship. They just add God. Some people even add the Holy Spirit, and they don't see them as three in one. They just see them as three separate entities. Or they'll believe in this version of a god, but while on this part of it, the continent, they believe in that version of a god. They'll, but both of those gods are still equally valid in the Hindu's mind, even though
So
they're completely contradictory,
a
depending
little
on
bit
who
of
you're talking to.
I'm gonna challenge you a little bit on that, and maybe blur
Hey,
the
go for it.
lines even further, which is hard to do. So we're talking about like our own history and stuff. So part of, for those who wonder, a large part of my college career was just studying other religions, and if I thought that it was a way that I could have made a career out of, I probably would have just majored in world religions because I took a lot of courses and I just really enjoyed it, and I eventually gave it up because this isn't how you make a living.
Yes.
Which, as I've grown up, I'm like, man, I should have just done it because what you majored in also isn't making you a living. I mean, you might as well have done what you
Nope.
enjoyed. Um, anyway, that's besides the point. um, Hinduism. So in practice, much like most Christians don't understand Christianity, like if you were to drill them the basic tenets of the faith and ask them to recite the Apostles' Creed, they wouldn't be able to. Same thing's true of Hinduism. If you're looking at it like how it actually is taught, and you were to ask like one of the teachers of Hinduism about it, they probably wouldn't tell you they believe in many gods. They would tell you they believe in God, in Vishnu, Shinu, all the other. That's not Shinu. Sorry. You know what I'm trying to say? Like all of these things were
Yes.
different iterations of God. They're all just God.
Mhm.
So they would say instead of 3 in 1, it's hundreds in 1, right?
Yes.
So to add Jesus or the Holy Spirit or anything is like, okay, yeah, God has all these other personas. Why not have those? No biggie.
Yeah.
Um,
And this differs from stuff like, your Greek and Roman mythologies, where they would just add on other people as soon as they conquered someone else or they moved somewhere else. This is more like, okay, yeah, your God was totally real this whole time. Now we've just been introduced to him. It's a different aspect, as you did say, of a God, of the God, as it were.
yeah, which just for the record, which I believe in a different kind of evangelism at the as now. I don't feel like I have this need to go tell everyone they immediately need to drop their beliefs and only subscribe to my beliefs exactly as I believe them. My thoughts on evangelism are a lot more nuanced these days, but at one point I was much more of the everyone needs to believe the way that I believe. And I remember talking to some people who believe in Hinduism, and man, was it frustrating because it's like, no, you need to believe in Jesus. Okay, I'll add him. No. He's the only God. Yeah, so are all of our others. They're the only God. It's like that's so frustrating. Like how do
Yes.
I discuss this with you? Um, at a certain point you have to just be a little bit wiser, make more sense. I'm reminded of Paul in the Bible when he sees the statues to all the gods and sees the one of the unknown God, and he doesn't sit there and go, "You're all wrong. There's only one God. His name's Jesus," and give them a theology lesson. He says, "Let me tell you about the unknown God." Right? Like he finds a way to relate to them and to give the message, and is okay with the idea that maybe everyone who walks away isn't going to say this is the only God now. Maybe they're going to understand it differently than him and work their way towards faith in Jesus in a different way than he did. Paul was okay with that. He understood that, and man, that's a hard thing to be okay with and understand. But I think it's something that we need to learn. That not everyone's going to believe exactly the same way from you. The best way for you to give a testimony isn't for you to correct someone's beliefs all the time, but rather to just tell them who Jesus is and trust that the Spirit's going to handle things from there. This is not supposed to be an evangelical a lesson in evangelizing. Sorry, guys. I'm just giving you some of my history with Hinduism, how I've wrestled when I was the kind of person trying to evangelize it. Now that I'm less that kind of person, I'm more the kind of person who wants to ask questions and learn about someone else's culture. And then as relevant, I'll tell them about mine. If they ask about Jesus, I'm going to tell them about Jesus. Christian, as far as you go, what is your history and what knowledge do you actually have of Hinduism? Because I wouldn't say that I'm an expert. I know some because I took classes. Yeah.
Yeah. Hinduism is one of the ones that just never really showed up in North Carolina growing up. And outside of stuff like Temple of Doom, or maybe a TV show, or maybe a book that I would read, I had never met a Hindu, knew nothing about it until college. And then at that point, I started, exploring it a little bit more. Like, what's this about? What do they believe? And I would also say I'm nowhere close to being an expert on anything here, but I know enough to sound at least somewhat competent. And I met someone and I worked with who believed that Jesus had left home in the periods of time where he's not his age, what he does isn't recorded, and he studied in India and he studied Hinduism and Buddhism and all this stuff. And I was like, yeah, I don't believe a word of what you just said, but I don't know how to disprove you. So that I had to do a lot of work there on
That's
my
an
own.
interesting
That was really
idea.
helpful. Yes.
Huh. Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm an expert. I'm surprised at how much it doesn't appear in stuff, actually, given its own popularity and stuff. I remember, this is just really funny. I actually remember it was during one of my religion classes. I didn't have to because I was really invested. When we covered a book or we were talking about something, I was going to go get the book and read it for myself. Which, by the way, it does include the Book of Mormon. I do have my own copy of the Book of Mormon. Find it interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I actually had to buy the Kama Sutra because we were talking about it in class. So I got it. And of course, this was the semester when I was living with other people that were going to the same church as me and Christian. And I got back from lunch one day and they all have this book out. Everybody's just looking at me like, Josh, do we need to have a conversation? Or and I'm like, guys, it's for class. It's fine. Oh, man. But that which also, Kama Sutra, I think that was the point where I realized unless I devote my life to it, I don't think I'm going to fully understand Hinduism because it's this like, there's this thing of like, we're teaching that bodily pleasure and your bodily experience isn't the important thing. We need to deny our body for the spiritual. But also, while we're talking about denying our body, we have an entire book about the ways to best appreciate intercourse. And it's like, hold up now. How am I denying my body if I'm trying to find the best way to... I don't understand. But hey, that's okay. I'm not meant to understand. I just want everyone to understand ahead of time. When we're talking about the things we're talking about, I can talk about how they're portrayed, but I am not an expert to say whether or not that's completely accurate in any way.
Yes.
And with that, let's talk about the life of Pi. I love the book. I really enjoyed the movie, not as much as the book, obviously, but I enjoyed both. This, it's a story of a young man. Is like his name is Pasine, but he got made fun of in school, so we changed it to Pi. You can guess why someone named Pasine was made fun of in school.
Yes.
He was kind of raised Hindu, a little kind of raised atheist. His parents were kind of split on this whole thing of whether God's real or whatever. Well, what's interesting is in his story, he meets a Catholic and he's like, I like this Jesus guy. So he's like, Jesus is God too. That's cool. Then he also ends up going to a mosque and he's like, Allah, that's just another name for God. I like this too. This is also a good story. And he just added both of these. So he was a Catholic Hindu Muslim. He ends up on a ship that gets in a wreck, destroyed, whatever. He ends up on a boat with a tiger, goes through this whole journey before he makes it back to civilization. Whether or not the tiger story is true is brought into question, but he points out that regardless of what story you take, it is true that he was in a wreck, he went through sufferings, and that he made it home. And the whole story is basically just should we believe in God at all? Is really the point of the story, not necessarily pluralism or anything like that. I think they add in the other religion stuff more or less to take you out of is Christianity right or Hinduism right, and rather to just only ask the question, does it make sense to believe in God? And if you look at the story of humanity, you might be able to explain everything away in something that makes perfect sense that's just real reasonable and dry. Or you might be able to see it through the lens of what if there is a God and what if there is hope? and ask yourself what story you would rather believe. And that's kind of the point of The Life of Pi. This isn't a review of The Life of Pi, so we're not going to go into deconstruct whether or not that point makes sense, or if we agree with it, or if we think pluralism is correct. That's not what we're doing. We might do that another time, because I've brought Life of Pi up twice during this series, and it turns out I like this more than I thought I did. But what is interesting is the contrast he makes between Hinduism and Christianity. When he meets the Catholic priest, at first he's like, well, it doesn't make any sense. Why is he sacrificing for other people? How is that love if someone's dying? Death isn't love. And he says that he finds this Jesus character irresistible. So he keeps coming back and he keeps wanting to learn more. And at one point he makes the statement that he found faith through Hinduism, but love through Christianity. And I don't know. I found that really compelling. It's an interesting thing of like how Hinduism opened him up to spirituality, to faith in general. And Hinduism is a more mystic faith usually than Christianity. So I can kind of see it opening you up to spirituality. But even in this story, like he desired something more. He desired that love, which is where he found Christianity. And for him, even that wasn't enough. And he had to find that servitude aspect in Islam, which we'll talk about maybe next month. But Christian, have you ever read or watched Life of Pi?
I've not read it, but I did watch the movie. I don't remember much about it. I do remember being infuriated by the ending. I can't imagine why I would, of all people, be infuriated at there not being an answer to something. But
Christian hates ambiguity.
As from what you bring up there, it is jogging some memories. And I find it very interesting in how he does portray it. I can't remember author's name off the top of my head, in how you have our character here explore all these different religions and take bits and pieces from each of them, which is kind of something else. Never mind. Another topic would be it's very interesting in that he looks, when it comes to love, it gets it from Christianity, from Jesus. And I remember there's a quote from Gandhi saying, I wish you Christians were more like your Christ. It's some paraphrase of that. And that's kind of a common belief in that area, some of which being Christians weren't acting as well as they should have been. And it comes to this scenario. Yeah, I like what it's exploring. I'd have to rewatch the film and read the book to give you more on this specific topic. But yeah, I just find it interesting. I have nothing else I can really add to that. It sounds profound.
Yeah, no, it is very interesting. I think it's a compelling story. And the story, I think it's meant to make you wrestle with why we believe in God, but also wrestle with how much pluralism makes sense or doesn't make sense to you. There's another quote that's like, faith is a house in which there are a lot of rooms. But, for me personally, when I look at the story of humanity, love seems to be the only answer to me of like why we're here, what would have started all this. Like, to me, capital L love seems like the answer. And I think it's very telling that when you go through these religions, Christianity is the one that seems to represent love the best. That being said, especially the more I get to know other Orthodox believers, Orthodox being more from Eastern traditions, I do see that a lot of times in our Western culture, we're missing some of this mystic. Of course, people are losing faith. We don't hold on to the mystic. We kind of value instead science and hard belief. And sometimes we let go of why we have faith in the first place. It's because there's something spiritual. There's stuff that's greater than just what we understand. And that's the part that he was able to get from Hinduism that opened him up to being able to believe Christianity. And I find that really, it's a compelling story. I wouldn't say that I recommend everyone believing in Hinduism before they become a Christian, but I do find it a very compelling story.
Yes.
All right. So with that, are you ready to go on to the next topic?
Sure thing.
All right. What the heck is this?
All right. So the Persona series. There's the 5 Persona games and a couple spin-offs. And then you have the Shin Megami Tensei games, which is...
So, wait, these are video games? Is this where Joker comes from?
Yes.
Is that what this guy here is?
The 5th one there is Joker.
Oh, okay. He was in Super Smash Bros., so I kind of know what we're talking about.
Yes. Yes.
Cool.
So Persona is kind of, and I mean this with love because I do love it. It's the baby version of Shin Megami Tensei, which is super duper heavy into
Shin
philosophy
Megami
and
Me what?
Shin Megami Tensei,
Okay.
which is super into philosophy and history and mythology and oh gosh, I should have added fate to this one. Yeah, that's a separate issue, but it's Persona as a series. Basically, I've never played the first 2 games, but the 3 through 5, you are a regular high school student. You move to a new place. In the process, you find that through some mystical means, you are able to go to a different place beyond this reality to fight these manifestations of the collective unconscious, which come in the form of representations of deities and demons and angels and all this. And you, main character, are able to control more than one and flip between them. Other characters you meet who become your allies typically only have one that might get evolve into something else, a la Pokemon, as it were. But it comes from Carl Jung's idea of the collective unconscious, of different cultures having similar things in their belief systems, in their religions and services and stuff like that. That I think most people kind of discredit it now. It's been a while since I've researched Jung, but as part of this, you can bring forth like Kali as a persona that you summon and fight. You can summon Shiva. You can let's see, let's go through all these bad boys. You can summon Devas and Rakshasas and Inku and Sarasvati, all these different things that come from the
Is
collective
Ganesha there?
unconscious of yeah, Ganesh is there as well,
That's
and
my
he's
favorite Hindu
very
god.
hard to fight if you don't have
Do you have a
psychic
favorite
damage.
Hindu god?
Favorite Hindu gods? Probably someone like Parvati or
I
Sarasvati.
I hope this isn't disrespectful. Like I do respect the culture, and I understand it's a very serious religion and belief, but also a little
Mhm.
bit. My mind sometimes treats it like comic books. I'm like, I love this character. Like when I read their literature, I'm like, I love when Ganesha shows up. This is gonna be good now.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Anyway,
Yeah, you're fine. So basically, it's not focused on a lot, but there are some Hindu ideas that all these beings exist out there in the world. And if you know enough about them, you can utilize them. And your main character is normally what's called the wild card, in that they're able to use more than one persona. And so they kind of collaborate with all these different deities and angels and demons and the like to utilize them in battle to protect the world. Some people trying to remake the world in their image, other people trying to just kill for the sake of killing, or ending all strife in the world, or stopping people from growing because the
mm,
stagnation is better than if people just keep causing problems for each other.
mm. Do you think? Well, so is it a demon that he summons in Super Smash Bros?
Arsene is the representation of the fictional character Arsene Lupin, which ties into him being a phantom thief. So most of them in Persona 5.
Okay.
As to whether or not he's actually a demon, no, it's more like this hodgepodge of different entities who can be summoned as personas this way.
Mm-hmm. And is there any spiritual significance to how easy it is to beat him when you're playing a Sora from Kingdom Hearts, the world's greatest video game franchise?
No, I've never played anyone as Joker against Sora because I played very little after Sora got released, and I wanted to get good at him.
God,
But so I
I
have no clue.
did. That was my greatest achievement. I was so happy. I was so worried. Sorry, guys, this is a side tangent. When they released Sora to Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, I was so worried that he was gonna suck or that I wasn't gonna be good with him. You know, because it's like I feel like part of my identity is like just the Kingdom Hearts guy, so I had to be good with him, right? Turns out they've made him perfectly to my play style, so it worked out.
Nice.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry. Anyway, so as
Uh,
far as like harnessing the gods, I do find that interesting because a lot of Hinduism, when we're talking about like some of the practices that I'm aware of. It's like yoga, meditation, a lot of this like physical connection to what is mystical, so that you're kind of channeling the mystic through you, kind of deal. Again, could be getting all this wrong. Please excuse me. Do you think that's like an intentional connection the game was making of like how they practice Hinduism in real life, or is that just kind of a fun coincidence?
I'd argue probably fun coincidence, but whoever is behind the designs and the mythologies of this system knows their stuff. So I would also not be surprised if they were actively thinking about that as they were developing things, because there's different means of bringing it in different games that you play. And three, there's like this time of there's a special hour that only you can interact with in the world, and that's when personas can come out. And in 4, it's
That's
like
fun.
there's a special world inside of the TV that you can enter. And Persona 5, it's like getting closer to that collective unconscious of humanity that creates this metaverse that exists alongside reality. That I could definitely see someone, if they were thinking of Hindu beliefs, you could kind of slide towards that area.
Hmm. Man, that's fun. Is there anything like as far as like what we can take as like a lesson from how they
Yeah.
portray Hinduism in this that you think are like applicable?
I think the general idea being is that there's a collective unconscious of humanity that dreams up these ideas that have similarities towards each other. Is something that we can look at any religion and see similarities between certain ideas. I mean, Christianity and plenty of other religions have, a savior figure of some type, and there's something that speaks about us as humans that we seek out that savior figure because we know there's something inherent within us. We're not good enough without them being there, and we need that extra help to get to where we need to be more enlightened, to know that there's something after this life. So there's plenty to take away from that idea.
Mm, man, all right, I'm with you there. I'm also with you on your next pick because this one I would have picked, and since you picked it, I didn't have to do as much research because I couldn't remember a lot of the stuff about this. We're gonna talk about
Yeah.
how Hinduism has shown up in Supernatural. I know it's shown up a couple of times. I think largely the one most people think of is going to be Kali's representation. Is that
Well,
where you
Ganesh
were
is there as
going?
well.
Well, Ganesh is there.
Yeah, but he doesn't get to really become full elephant in the massacre.
Why? I
So
just want
so
elephants.
so if you want your religion or your mythology to be poorly represented and yet have an entertaining time watching it, watch Supernatural. In season
I'll
5,
push back on that later.
I'm sure you will. In season 5, there is a moment, the apocalypse is happening. There's going to be a big throwdown between Michael and Lucifer. The Winchester brothers, Sam and Dean, are going to be their chosen representatives, their avatars in this world. So you got to be wondering, in a show that has portrayed gods and deities before, well, how are they going to interact with this whole apocalypse scenario? So you get to, I think it's Hammer of the Gods is the episode, where you get Mercury and Balder and Ganesh and Kali and Baron Samedi. I'm sure there's more I'm forgetting. Oh, and Loki shows up as well.
Loki is the greatest part of this. I want to do a whole
Yes.
episode on that character.
Oh, so great. So the whole
Maybe
purpose is
next time.
having a conference to be like, hey, this whole apocalypse is happening. What do we do? And come to find out, they can do jack all because Lucifer shows up and starts massacring them right and left. And this got a lot of pushback from the Hindu community because Kali and Ganesh are no jokes in Hindu mythology. They are like, there's much to be argued about them being the people who could actually bring about the end of the world. So when it comes to Supernatural, what they really take a lot of influence from is Neil Gaiman's American Gods book, which is fantastic, one of the best pieces of fiction ever made. But the central premise of that is that the gods that appear in a nation are dependent on the people who worship them for how strong they are. And there are Hindu believers in America, but not really as much as, say, India. So if Kali were to appear in India in that form, she'd be way more powerful than the Kali of America. So that's kind of what they take their inspiration from. That's why they're not as powerful. But also, it's considered to be this is only her versus there being multiple versions of her in different countries. It, it's its own thing. So she's actually one of the few to actually make it out alive, if I remember correctly, and never shows up again.
Yeah, I feel like it just gets a little complicated when they start introducing the other gods and stuff, especially as the story progresses, where God, or Charles, if you will, Chuck, uh, he is revealed that he created all the universes. And that's what's interesting is so my pushback would be, it does seem like to the finest detail that the writers of the show put a lot of research into this stuff, and I think they do their best to portray these things in a way that makes sense in their universe. And their universe happens to be wildly different from our universe, whether that's the Christian take on our universe, the Hindu take on our universe, any of that. Our universe wasn't, in any religion that I'm aware of, our universe is not created from a god who was simply bored because he wrote a bunch of other universes and that story turned out kind of boring. So let's write a new one. Like that, it's just not happens. So if you're going to take the premise of the universe of Supernatural, I think this is the closest you can get to a good depiction of these other things. But maybe I'm wrong. But it does seem like they get a lot of the details right. So I don't think they just kind of make up whatever. I think they try to do some subtle nods to stuff. I did hear, though, that this episode upset a lot of people.
Yes.
And you know, I get it. I do get it. It was a risky move because they more or less say the Christian gods and Christian religion stuff, that stuff is all real in this universe. And these other gods and stuff, they're kind of just made up by humans. And it's just kind of like, oh, that's not great. And even if you follow like the logic of later stuff and lore and Supernatural, it kind of just suggests that the real God, Chuck, created these other ones for fun, more or less. It was kind of like, oof. But yeah, it's a show written for Americans, made in America, and most people in America are more aware of and practice a particular religion over another. So just if you're thinking simply off of, hey, what's going to sell best, they were going to do better if they made the Christian God to be the real one and then the other ones as, fake knockoffs. Because if they did it the other way around, because you can't have, this be real and that other one be just as real. You can't have Chuck as the all-creating God and also Kali as the all-creating God. Someone had to create, and someone else was just there at the end of the day. If you're going to choose who, and you know who your audience is, you're going to choose the one that makes you the more money. Like, honestly, I feel like that's really what it came down to.
I have plenty of gripes with the theology of Supernatural, but I also recognize where it comes from.
I'll argue that if you had to pick any religion that Supernatural portrays the best, it would be Satanism. And that's not a thing against Supernatural. That's just a understanding of the show and also an understanding of what that religion is really trying to teach, of freedom being the ultimate value and Satan kind of feeling betrayed by God because God gave more agency to humans, and Satan's like, hey, I kind of want to do what I want. I don't want to be subject to anything else. And that is sort of the moral of Supernatural. Yeah. Although, I will say, they do come back to life a lot. So maybe some reincarnation. We can get a Hinduism there.
It's gracious.
Did you have anything as far as like values that we can get out of how Supernatural portrayed this or anything? Or we just wanted to point out that it was there?
I mean, more so it being there, but also, hey, like, if you didn't know who these people were, there's plenty of value in looking them up and finding out why people were upset and how they were portrayed.
Yeah. Well, and I think there is something there too of, maybe I'm digging too much, but I feel like there's something there of, are our stories as powerful as reality, right? Like I think the reason, if you're the in-universe reason that Lucifer's able to just go in and wipe everyone out, because everyone else was just lesser reject creatures, and Lucifer was part of the real deal stuff. He was part of capital G God, you know?
And I even agree with that. It's just poorly portrayed.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree. Yeah, that's just it. I think they could have been more respectful, if anything. But again, they were trying to tell a story, and it's not like Christians are all like, "Oh, this was great for Christianity." Like, there are no religious circles that walk away from this show going, "Yeah, they made us to be the good guys," because that's just not the case at all. Everyone's bad. Even Satan is bad in the end. Satan and God are both the bad guys. Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
Freedom is the good guy. Which, it's funny, because my favorite Bible verse is Galatians 5:1. It is for freedom he set us free. Therefore, do not slave yourself to a yoke of bondage. I don't know. I don't remember the exact words. I just remember it's Galatians 5:1. And I remember that it is for freedom he set us free bit, because that sounds fun. Sounds good, you know? Christian's just laughing at me. All right, let's move on. Doctor Who, Demons of the Punjab. I had to rewatch this separate from its context, because its context is some of the worst Doctor Who, because of the writer and everything around it. Not good. But this episode on its own, I actually thought was a really good episode. I really appreciate how it was written, how it was portrayed, the bit of history. I even remember there's a few books I got because I realized that after watching this episode of Doctor Who, I realized that I didn't really understand that well what happened when England just decided, let there be Pakistan. You know?
Uh-huh.
And because I realized I had such a knowledge gap, I actually did a lot of research thanks to this episode of Doctor Who that led me to appreciate other people's culture and religion a lot better, I think, and really had me questioning a lot of stuff about the world, because it's like, oh, man, a lot of that Muslim versus Hindu rhetoric was just created by the Western culture. We were like, you guys are merging too much. We don't like that. Separate. You know, like, we created polarization because it made us uncomfortable that there wasn't polarization. And it's like, oh, that's so gross. Like just so gross. But yeah. So this is the 13th Doctor, who doesn't get as much credit as she deserves because her writer was garbage. I just can't reiterate that enough. Bad
argument
writing.
here.
Yeah. But one of her companions had some stuff with her grandmother. She wanted to go see the past where her grandmother was. Doctor's like, this is a bad idea. They have a really lame argument, and the writers just kind of decided, they're going to go to the past now, okay? They're going to do it. So they do it. They do it because they said so. They end up going to the past, seeing her grandmother, and learning a lot of what happened. It's when England is creating the border, creating Pakistan, and you see that Yaz, is her name Yaz?
Yes.
Her grandma. Okay, so her grandmother is engaged to she's Muslim. She's engaged to a Hindu man. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, from India, and they're right there on the border. They're wanting to be married. She wants to be the first woman married in Pakistan because Pakistan was just created. A lot of shenanigans go down. They end up meeting some aliens that they think killed his brother. And then it turns out that it was actually someone else who was upset that this union was happening because we hate the Muslims now because England told us to. I'm oversimplifying it, but whatever.
Yes.
Turns out the aliens are actually the last of their kind, and they're just observing when people die on their own. They're basically paying respects to the dead. So they show up when they know someone's going to die alone to record the death so that they weren't truly alone. Random, they kind of their whole plot, I think, only exists to kind of subvert expectations. And
it's to have an alien in a Doctor Who episode.
Yes. We need an alien. That's why. Yeah, so it was really interesting to see how these cultures kind of mesh together. Even in the wedding ceremony, the Doctor ends up being the one to marry them, officiate the wedding. It was interesting that the Muslim woman actually tied the knot around their hands, which is a Hindu wedding ritual, and they're kind of paying homage to one another. And because polarization has to happen, the man does end up dying in the end, alone. Kind of, not really, but kind of. It's a very tragic story, but it really explores why religion actually separates us and whether or not we should let it separate us. What did you think of this episode? Did you ever get to watch it on its own, or is it still just tied to all of the other nastiness to you?
I haven't watched it separate from just binging it all, and I finally got into the 13th Doctor just to prepare for 14. And you could argue that I wasted my time. I might agree somewhat with that idea, but when it comes to this whole religious separation thing, it is manufactured and created as a means of controlling a population that was prone to rebellion, prone to causing problems. So, well, if we uplift this people over here, we'll make them better and they can deal with these idiots over here who we're not going to uplift. And then the colonial practices in general were pretty poor. This was another example of being a poor leader of a country. If you're going to conquer it, like, be a better leader in that regard. The British Empire was not very good at that. Just look at the Middle East and the way that France and Britain partitioned different regions of there, not because it fit with the people involved, but because they just wanted the map to look that way. Or really, at the end of the day, I'm oversimplifying it, but it's still out there. And when it comes to the partition between India and Pakistan, Pakistan being a large majority Muslim nation, India majority Hindu with a significant Muslim population, significant Christian population, significant Buddhist, but it got to portray some history that needed to be shown. So I'm very grateful for that. And in fact, your girl Miss Marvel, they do show a little bit of this in a flashback for her grandmother as well, if I remember correctly, of the
Oh yeah,
breaking between the two nations. And it just caused immense problems that wouldn't have existed had not outside forces made them a thing. There's always going to be religious strife
yeah,
regardless. You don't need people to foment it, but it doesn't help when people actively do that.
yeah.
And this episode was a good reaction against that idea. I'll give it that.
Oh yeah. I think one of the things that's interesting is how like the shift of Western Eastern cultures, which this is good that this is our last major Eastern religion we're covering in this series. It's more of a Western idea that you have a religion and that religion includes other religions. That's not really a thing in most Eastern cultures. You're not in Japan, you're not usually thought of either Taoist or Confucianist. You Taoist and Confucianist and maybe some other stuff. You know, like the idea of religion is a completely different concept over there. That word just has a different connotation and meaning. Whereas here in America, and it is because, you know, most of us are Christian and you either believe in Jesus or you don't. So you're either Christian or you're not Christian. So we have this more of a diametric, I guess, belief or culture around religion that doesn't necessarily exist over there. And
Mhm.
we kind of want to put people in the categories that make sense to us. And that's a lot of what happened here. So for them, it was a lot easier. And also some of it comes down to like the what the point of the religion is. I have a harder time with that with Hinduism, but I know in Islamic belief, unlike Christianity, in Christianity we believe everyone's born sinner, and you have to accept God or Christ, and He can make you good. In Islamic tradition, you're born neutral. You're not good or bad when you're born, and your actions can either lead you to be good or bad. Which, if you think of that towards its logical conclusion, means people don't necessarily have to believe you're God or anything to be okay in the end, which creates a whole different level of how you interact with other people from other religions. You don't have that strife of, I need to convert you or you're going to go to hell. Thoughts, Christian?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree.
Yeah.
That makes
Yeah.
perfect sense. From a more Western ideal comes from the Christian baggage of, and I still believe it, in that you need to be one or the other. You need to have faith in Christ alone. But then you introduce it to areas like this where that's not a thing, and there's going to be obvious conflict there. And then you enforce that conflict on other people who normally wouldn't have had this issue. It's just going to exacerbate it.
Yeah. And I think that's part of why, like, for me, is, and this is a way that enlightened me to understanding that talking about the consequences of not being saved maybe isn't the best evangelical tool. Isn't say, hey, you're going to go to hell if you don't believe Jesus, or hey, this. Maybe the best is to show love, that desirable part. Even going back to like the life of Pi, it wasn't that he was scared of hell, so he's like, let me also take on Christianity so I don't have to worry about that bad place. It was more he saw love, he saw the good aspect, and he desired the positives. And I think sometimes maybe instead of separating people so we can show them all why they're wrong and then persecute everyone who doesn't believe the way we want, maybe we should show them what is desirable about Christianity. Not that we have to deny or drop our other beliefs, but I think that there's a better way to go about it than separating people and persecuting people.
Your opening act is not "you're going to hell."
Yeah. That shouldn't be your opening statement. All right, to start the argument, let me tell you, you're going to go to hell. Here's why you need to believe Jesus, you sinner. Anyway, I think the one that I noticed last minute that might be the most obvious one, the more I think about it, how Doctor Strange portrays Hinduism. Most of his power set and the mystic arts in Marvel Comics actually comes from different Hindu thoughts, including the third eye there. I don't know why I use that image. I don't like that image, but here it is. Just something about a third eye just creeps me out. I don't know, man.
It doesn't belong there.
Yeah, how dare he have that? As far as like the connections, the astral projection thing, that's a thing of Hinduism. The ancient one, both in the comics and in the movie, is a Hindu monk. When you're talking about like the way they react to other dimensions, the meditation, the chakra. He talks a lot about chakra, which also we could have talked about Avatar: The Last Airbender again, just realizing that, but we didn't. Sorry. But all of these things is like mystic arts and stuff. A lot of them in his power set comes from Hindu belief. Christian, what do you realize as far as like what connections do you make between Hinduism and Doctor Strange power set and comic story, any of that?
Well, his origin is heavily reliant on it. I mean, his origin in the real world. In the 60s, when Stan and Steve were creating him, there was a lot of New Age influence starting to happen in America, and they noticed that. So they took it and made this character based off of those ideas of these mystical paths you can take and these mystical beliefs one would have. And you're opening your third eye and going astral projecting and all this magical power that to an American audience at the time was incredibly alien and foreign and interesting, all bending around creating the character of Stephen Strange so that they could utilize those things and tell a story with it. Now, it's not a perfect representation of any of these new age beliefs, but it's where they got the inspiration from it. And Hinduism was definitely one of those things they got inspiration from.
Yeah, even the Eye of Armagu or whatever, however you say that, that's on his neck.
Agamotto.
Yeah. That even comes from like some of the beliefs in Hinduism around like the cycle of time and how time cycles itself. So that's also, just fascinating thing because in Hinduism, life comes from death, death comes from life, and everything is a cycle. And something about that, the cycle of time is actually, I forget the exact origin, but I remember that actually comes up when they explain how the eye works that Doctor Strange wields so powerfully. I think what's interesting here too is like, I've also wondered, and maybe this exists in anime and I just don't realize it exists. But like when you think of like a lot of like religious things and the claims they're making, it's really easy to interpret it as superpowers. Like it would be easy to read the gifts of the Spirit in the New Testament with no connection to Christianity. Be like, oh yeah, I'm going to create a superpower who knows how to speak every language, every tongue. He can heal anyone at will. He knows the future. He has prophecy. He's Like it'd be really easy to create a superpower with like Christian powers from the New Testament. And I'm kind of surprised it doesn't happen more. And I feel like that's what's happening here. Like in actual Hindu practice, I don't think they're thinking that literally this is what astral projection looks like, or we could tell the future with a time eyeball or any of that kind of stuff. Or they don't think that there's a literal third eye you can open in your forehead. But it's easy to turn those ideas into superpowers. I'm surprised we don't have the same thing with Christianity, actually.
Well, if you're going with anime, Shintoism is probably your best bet for something they turn magical. We did Taoism too. That's what the Outlaw Star did. We did a while back.
Yeah.
But Christianity is seen as just as mystic because it's foreign. It's uh, not really understood. So that'll show up in anime as kind of like you have mystical powers worshiping Jesus. But
Yeah. Well,
Hinduism,
that's why I
don't
was
see a
thinking of it
lot.
as anime, just because, like, so in my mind, the reason we don't do that in American comics is everyone's super familiar with Christianity. So the moment you start doing that, be like,
Yeah,
wait a minute, that's not what that means. We can get away with Hinduism because people don't know that as well.
yeah.
But in Japanese culture, I don't know how familiar they are with Christianity, if they're able to do more of that mystic stuff because people aren't over familiar with the material.
From what I understand, it's more like a surface level understanding.
Hmm. But Blue Exorcist has some fun with it.
Indeed, it does.
If we don't talk
That
about
makes
Blue Exorcist when we
magical
do the Catholic
Catholicism.
episode, something's wrong. Oh man, yeah. So, what are your favorite Doctor Strange powers that maybe come from some of these Hindu thoughts?
That's a good question. I mean, astral projection has always been a fun idea to me.
Yeah, it's
To be
good.
like, I could go and see anything and not have to worry about paying for travel or someone looking at me or bothering me. I could just look at stuff and explore. That sounds like a ton of fun to me. Be that in control of my own spirit and soul.
Hmm. Yeah, I see. I like that one. I think too. This is gonna sound weird, but how meditation works for him, I wish it worked that way for me. Like there's always like he sits there with like the eye Ramagu, or I can never say the name right. Can you help me out
Agamotto.
again? Thank you. And he just meditates and he's like, okay, I've seen like 500 different versions of the future. Here's what we need to do. Or like he meditates and he's able to like do this astral projection or see all these like mystic creatures and go visit other places and do stuff. And I'm like, man, when I sit here with my own thoughts and meditate, usually I come up with Josh, stop. Nope, you don't need to do that. And my head just keeps going. The Krusty Krab pizza is the pizza for you and him. Like my meditation is far less cool as his, Like it's just more of a
Yes.
struggle to not think about something silly.
Yes. I
Yeah.
fail miserably with meditation myself because there's always something else my mind wants to think about.
Yeah. Like, hey, I wish realistically it would just be cool if I could meditate and get some spiritual benefit from it. However, man, if I could meditate and then suddenly be in Korea somewhere and have a physical representation of myself that can control time slightly, I'll take that. But anything's better than just sitting there trying not to think. The Krusty Krab pizza is the pizza. How did I bring SpongeBob into this episode? It's a great question. I apologize, everybody.
Because you're you, Joshua.
Oh, man. Well, did you have any other thoughts of like how Hinduism is portrayed in Doctor Strange or what maybe we can learn from its portrayals there?
I mean, not really. Without doing further studying into exactly what they're taking things from, you're not really
Hmm.
going to notice it.
Yeah, I do think that one of the things I can take from how it's portrayed, and also even my own thought of like how Christianity could be portrayed if we were less familiar with it, maybe we over familiarize ourselves with ideas of the spiritual to the extent that we forget that the spiritual actually exists. If that makes sense.
Mhm.
Like it's so commonplace to hear the biblical stories that sometimes we forget that God still does heal. I still can pray for
Mhm.
these things. I still can believe in these things. There are still mystical parts of Christianity of like meditating and prophecy and, believing that God can speak into your life in powerful ways that maybe don't make sense to our common sense science brains that we learned in the Western culture. And maybe sometimes a little bit of mysticism is a good thing for our faith journeys. Even if we can't astral project or stop thinking about SpongeBob.
Not yet.
Not yet. One day. A little more medication and practice. I'll get there. All right. Well, if that's all we got, I think I'm ready to wrap this one up. This was fun. I didn't realize we'd have so much to talk about with Hinduism in our fandoms, but turns out it was a good time. We had plenty.
Absolutely.
Anyway, come on. How long's he?
And with that, we'll go ahead and wrap this up. We are going to do a recommendation. I'm going to make you go first because I'm trying to remember the name of my recommendation. Because it actually is it's a Hindu text that I thought was really cool. That's like a common part of their. I can't think of the name of their scripture.
The Bhagavad Gita.
I don't think it was the Bhagavad Gita. Which one is
Okay.
But yeah, it's one of the Vedas.
Okay.
You go ahead and do yours.
Yeah, in that respect, I mean, how many times can I recommend X-Men 97 and X-Men the animated series? If you guys haven't watched them, you are missing out. Do you need to watch the original? If you want to understand everything, yes. If not, you can just jump right in. It's a ton of fun. Great characterization, great animation, great plot. Like, it is so good to see them back in action again in animated form. I tried to buy you as much time as possible.
Tell us more about that.
Oh my gosh. I'm looking forward to the new episodes, and I'm glad it's been confirmed for having a second season. Oh, and he's gone. Goodbye, Joshua. We'll always remember you. Blank black screen and white format with the symbol of a person in gray surrounding that person symbol. Man, you were certainly someone, Joshua. I'm so glad you left me in this predicament to just talk to the audience. Hey, how's it going, guys? Yeah, there you go. He's back.
Maybe it is the Bhagavad Gita. I don't remember. Is the Bhagavad Gita the one that has there's a warrior and he's trying to, basically he doesn't want to be a warrior, but that's the class he was born into. And he's stuck between the decision to either play the role he was given, which is part of Hindu belief and part of their culture.
Mm-hmm.
And then playing that role would mean killing his brothers, his own family, or being loyal to his family and denying his role that he was born into. It says both things are part of their culture, both things are part of their religion, and trying to make sense of, like, how do I make this choice? Then boom, turns out that his carriage driver was actually Vishnu in disguise. And has a really meaningful and cool conversation. Also, should be a graphic novel, would be cool. Hopefully it's Bhagavad Gita. If it's not, keep searching things that sound like that story till you find it.
I'd love to see that portrayed in art
too. It would be great. Yeah, art is fun. Art makes these stories more fun. I mean, we have the Action Bible. We got some good Bible comics. Word by word Bible comic. We talked to the author of that before. Stuff's good. I just need someone to do some of the Vedas and different stories of the Hindu gods, because these are some really cool, action-packed, fun stories. If you like story, you really should dive more into Hindu text, I think, because they have some great stories. You don't have to believe them to appreciate the story. They're great. A lot of fun, good morals. I appreciate them. Anyway, with that in mind, sorry I couldn't remember the name of that, guys. Don't hold it against me. Instead, support us on Patreon so we can make more of this stuff for live, and you can join people to interact with us live and ask questions and enjoy some of these recordings as they happen. You get to change. You could have been here live if you knew the name of the book I was trying to say and said, wait, Josh, it's called this. It would have changed this whole recording if you were here and were able to give me the answer. Hey, guys, and remember, smash that like and subscribe button. And, of course, also remember, outro music. That's an important thing to remember. And remember. Oh, yeah. If you're listen to our podcast anytime. Go to Podchaser, leave us a rating and review. That helps. And remember, we're all a chosen people, a geekdom of priest.